figures just released are damning. And they reveal a transport system where millions of Londoners no longer feel safe. Between January and June 2025, there were 23,819 crimes reported across Transport for London services. That is a 1.3% increase from the same period the previous year. Violence is up 5.5%. Sexual offences rose from 879 to 907. Hate crime exploded by 27.8% in the first 8 months of 2024, jumping from 1,551 to 1,982 offences. And those are just the reported crimes. The true scale is far worse. New data from TfL's Customer Pulse survey reveals that 39% of passengers felt worried on public transport in the past 3 months. Nearly 1 in 10 Londoners, 9%, were completely or temporarily deterred from using the network due to a worrying incident they had experienced. The most crime-ridden tube lines have been identified. The Central Line recorded 1,069 offences in the first half of 2025. The Northern Line saw 1,063. King's Cross Street Pancras topped the list of most dangerous stations with 359 offences, 4.7% of the total. Oxford Circus recorded 281 offences. This is not just statistics. This is fear. This is commuters changing their routes, avoiding certain lines, skipping journeys entirely because they no longer trust the system to keep them safe. Why does this matter now? And why should every Londoner and every politician feel the urgency? Because London's transport network is the lifeblood of the capital. Over 5 million journeys are made daily on the tube, buses, and overground. When crime rises, when passengers feel unsafe, when women avoid travelling alone at night, the entire city suffers. The data reveals patterns that are deeply troubling. Violence against women and girls on the transport network increased to 12,082 offences in 2024 to 2025, a 5% rise. Sexual assaults are most common between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m., precisely when people are commuting home from work. Over 30% of sexual offences occur during that 4-hour window. On buses, the problem is youth and school-related antisocial behaviour, cited by 15% of worried passengers. Threatening behaviour and fighting accounts for another 14%. On the underground, drunken passengers or passengers drinking alcohol are the most cited concern at 21%. And hate crime is soaring. The 27.8% surge in the first 8 months of 2024 has been linked to heightened tensions around the Israel-Gaza conflict. British Transport Police confirmed the spike correlates with escalating geopolitical tensions. But regardless of cause, the result is the same. Communities feel targeted. Passengers feel unsafe. This is not just a policing failure. This is a systemic crisis. Let us trace how London Transport arrived at this crisis point, because the warning signs have been building for years. For much of the 2010s, crime on London transport was relatively stable. Passenger numbers grew, but crime rates per million journeys remained low. TfL and the Metropolitan Police touted London's transport network as one of the safest in the world. Then came the pandemic. Crime plummeted during lockdowns as passenger numbers collapsed. But when the city reopened, crime did not return to pre-pandemic levels. It surged past them. Between 2023 and 2024, crime on the Central Line rose 30%. Oxford Circus station alone recorded 360 incidents. Sexual offences on TfL services hit a 5-year high. Between April 2015 and October 2025, there were 6,475 reports of sexual offences on tube trains, an average of 1.7 per day. By early 2025, the pattern was undeniable. Recorded crime on the London Underground was 13.1% higher than the previous year. The crime rate per million passenger journeys stood at 20.7, up from 20.8 the year before. But crucially, passenger confidence was collapsing. The latest TfL data from January to June 2025 shows 39% of passengers felt worried. That is not a marginal concern. That is a crisis of trust. The core allegation here is simple and devastating. TfL and the police have lost control of the transport network, and passengers are paying the price. Despite TfL deploying over 500 uniformed officers across the network, despite collaboration with the Metropolitan Police and British Transport Police, crime is rising. Violence is up. Sexual offences are up. Hate crime is up. And passengers are too frightened to travel. The London Assembly released a damning report in December 2025 highlighting the surge in violence against women and girls and hate crime on public transport. It called for urgent action. But the response has been inadequate. TfL insists the overall risk of experiencing a crime on London's transport network remains low. They cite millions of journeys made daily without incident. They emphasize active encouragement of reporting, which they claim accounts for some of the rise in recorded crime. But that explanation rings hollow. If 39% of passengers feel worried, if 9% are deterred from travelling, if sexual offences are at a 5-year high, the system is failing. And the repeated claim that increased reporting explains the rise is an admission that the true scale of crime was always higher than officials acknowledged. The political pressure is mounting. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, faces intense scrutiny. The opposition accuses him of presiding over a lawless transport network. Commuters are demanding action, not reassurances. The political fallout from these figures is accelerating, and it is coming from every direction. Sadiq Khan and TfL are under siege. The Conservative opposition is hammering them relentlessly. They accuse Khan of failing to deliver safe public transport. They point to the Central Line's 30% crime surge. They highlight the 27.8% explosion in hate crime. They frame this as Labour's London, a city descending into chaos. Within the London Assembly, pressure is building. A detailed investigation into hate crime and violence against women and girls on public transport was launched in October 2025. The findings, released in December, exposed the scale of the crisis. Key data points included the 27.8% hate crime surge and the 5% rise in violence against women and girls. Assembly members are demanding immediate action. They want more police on trains and buses. They want better CCTV coverage. They want harsher penalties for offenders. And they want TfL to stop downplaying the crisis. But TfL's response has been defensive. They emphasize that crime remains low per million journeys. They tout partnerships with police. They highlight campaigns encouraging reporting. But none of this addresses the fundamental problem. Passengers do not feel safe. And perception is reality. Politically, this is toxic for Labour. Khan is seen as the face of urban crime. If Londoners feel unsafe on the tube, if women avoid travelling alone, if hate crime is soaring, voters will punish Labour at the ballot box. To understand the gravity of this moment, we must compare it to previous crises on London transport. In the early 2000s, London faced a similar surge in transport crime. Robbery and mobile phone theft on the Underground spiked. The Metropolitan Police responded with Operation Safer Travel, deploying more officers and installing CCTV. Crime fell. In 2011, the London riots exposed vulnerabilities across the transport network. Stations were vandalised. Buses were attacked. The response included increased police presence and stricter enforcement. It worked, but only temporarily. In 2017, a series of terror attacks on London transport, including the Parsons Green bombing, shook public confidence. Security was massively increased. Armed police became a visible presence. Passengers gradually returned. Today's crisis is different. It is not a one-off event. It is a sustained, multi-year surge across multiple crime categories. Violence is up. Sexual offences are up. Hate crime is exploding. And unlike previous crises, there is no clear intervention that will restore confidence. The historical lesson is this: without decisive action, without visible enforcement, without consequences for offenders, crime on transport networks spirals. And once public confidence is lost, it is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. The consequences of this crisis are immediate, long-term, and politically catastrophic. Short-term, millions of Londoners are altering their behaviour. Women avoid travelling alone at night. Passengers skip journeys on high-crime lines like the Central and Northern. Commuters change routes to avoid King's Cross, Oxford Circus, and other hotspots. The transport network, designed to connect the city, is instead fragmenting it. Businesses suffer. If employees feel unsafe commuting, they demand remote work. If customers avoid certain areas due to crime, retail and hospitality collapse. The economic cost is enormous. Long-term, the damage is deeper. If an entire generation of Londoners grows up feeling unsafe on public transport, they will never trust it. They will drive instead, worsening congestion and pollution. Or they will move out of London entirely, hollowing out the city's workforce and tax base. And politically, this is existential for Sadiq Khan and Labour. Khan has been mayor since 2016. He cannot credibly blame his predecessors. This is his record. If crime continues to rise, if passengers continue to feel unsafe, if the next election is fought on law and order, Labour will be punished. The Conservatives are already framing the narrative. London is unsafe. Khan has failed. Labour cannot be trusted. And the data, unfortunately, supports that narrative. Beyond party politics, this crisis strikes at fundamental principles of equality and access. When women are disproportionately targeted for sexual offences, when 12,082 violence against women and girls offences are recorded in a single year, transport is no longer equal. Women pay the same fares, but receive less safety. They alter their behaviour, avoid certain times and places, and live in fear. That is not equality. When hate crime surges 27.8%, when LGBTQ+ passengers experience hate crime at alarming rates, when tensions around geopolitical conflicts manifest as violence on buses and trains, public transport becomes exclusionary. Minority communities feel targeted. They avoid the network. That is not inclusion. And when youth and school-related antisocial behaviour dominates buses, when threatening behaviour and fighting are commonplace, when drunken passengers create hostile environments, the network fails its most basic function. It is supposed to be safe, accessible, and welcoming. Instead, it is intimidating, unpredictable, and frightening. The London Assembly investigation highlighted these failures. It called for TfL to take urgent action to tackle violence against women and girls and hate crime. It demanded better support for victims, harsher penalties for offenders, and visible enforcement. But the response has been inadequate. TfL emphasises partnerships and campaigns. The police highlight arrest figures. But crime continues to rise. And passengers continue to feel unsafe. The most damaging revelation in the latest data is not any single statistic. It is the cumulative picture of a system in decline. Overall crime up 1.3%. Violence up 5.5%. Sexual offences up from 879 to 907. Hate crime up 27.8% in 8 months. Violence against women and girls up 5% to 12,082 offences. Central Line crime up 30% year-on-year. King's Cross recording 359 offences, the highest of any station. And the human cost. 39% of passengers feeling worried. 9% deterred from travelling. Women avoiding night travel. Communities targeted by hate crime. Youth antisocial behaviour terrorising buses. Drunken passengers creating hostile environments on the underground. TfL insists the overall risk remains low. They cite 5 million daily journeys. They emphasise that most trips are incident-free. But this misses the point entirely. Risk is not just about statistics. It is about perception. And when 39% of passengers feel worried, the system has failed. The public reaction has been swift. Passengers are demanding action. Women's groups are calling for urgent measures to tackle sexual violence. LGBTQ+ organisations highlight the 21% of LGBTQ+ passengers who experience hate crime on transport, with 84% of incidents going unreported. But the government and TfL response remains inadequate. Statements about partnerships. Promises of campaigns. No concrete action. No visible enforcement. No consequences for offenders. Here is the warning, and it must be heard clearly across City Hall, Westminster, and every transport hub in London. London's transport network is not just experiencing a crime surge. It is experiencing a collapse in public confidence. When 39% of passengers feel worried, when 9% are deterred from travelling, when women avoid night journeys, the system is broken. If current trends continue, if violence keeps rising, if sexual offences hit new highs, if hate crime continues to explode, the consequences will be catastrophic. Passengers will abandon public transport. The economic and environmental costs will be enormous. And London's status as a world city will be undermined. Sadiq Khan and TfL have a narrow window to act. They must deploy more police on trains and buses, visibly and consistently. They must install better CCTV coverage and ensure swift prosecution of offenders. They must tackle youth antisocial behaviour with education and enforcement. They must address alcohol-fueled disorder on the underground. They must protect women and girls with dedicated measures. They must confront hate crime with zero tolerance. If they fail, the next set of statistics will be worse. The next survey will show more passengers deterred. And the political price will be devastating. This is not just about crime rates or passenger numbers. This is about the fundamental right to safe, accessible public transport. This is about women who should not have to fear travelling alone. This is about communities who should not be targeted with hate. This is about a city that must function for everyone. The data is published. The crisis is undeniable. The question now is whether those in power have the courage, the resources, and the political will to restore safety to London's transport network before it is too late.